This quick video is going to review a study skill called visual retrieval that can help students while studying either at home or on campus. It's all based on how your brain works. Let's take a look. I'm going to show you a list of animals. So I'd like you to look at the screen and think about the first animal that comes to mind when I show you the list. Are you ready? Here we go. What animal was it? Was it a frog? There's probably a pretty good reason. Here's that list. It says rabbit, duck, fish, clam, mongoose, turtle, aardvark, and there's a picture of a frog. The reason that most of you watching this video thought frog was because there is a visual image of a frog, and your brain processes visual images immediately. In order for you to process the words in a sentence, your brain literally has to process every letter and every word in every sentence and every paragraph, the spaces between the words, and that can become a little bit more time consuming. And what we end up doing is memorizing and trying to memorize lists. And our brains simply don't work that way. And here's how using that visual stimulus can come into play when you're studying. Let's start with studying on campus. So, what are the top two places that you think students study when they're on campus? Think about it for just a second. All right, we'll play a little family feud here. Survey says the top two answers of where students study are either in the library or in their dorm rooms. And there's a huge problem with studying in the library or studying in the dorm rooms. I understand that students do it because it's convenient. They look around and they see that other students are studying there. And I often hear students say, well, it's because it's quieter. I'm not necessarily sure the dorms are always quieter. I really do think it's really just about convenience. And the problem with studying in these two places is as follows. How many of you have ever taken an exam, and when you sit down to take that exam, you look at the material and you go, oh my gosh, I should know this. I studied for this. Why can't I remember this? And then after the exam's over, you go back home or back to your dorm where you studied, and you sit down and you go, oh my goodness, I just remembered the answer to that question. There's a reason that that's happened to you. It's because you returned your brain to the location where you studied. And what happens is, as you are studying material, your brain is encoding that information and it's associating it with the things around you at the time. So if you were studying in your kitchen and you were looking at your toaster while you were studying, when you got back home and you looked at your toaster, your brain started to remember those things that you were studying, and that's why you remembered the answer. The problem is you don't take a test in your kitchen. You don't take a test in the library. You take a test in a very specific classroom while you're on campus. So if you know where your brain and where your eyes are going to be on the day of the exam, study in the classroom. Sit in the very seat where you are going to take that exam. And as you're studying the material, your brain is associating the material with those visual stimuli that are going to be present on the day that you have to recall that information. Write the information down on the whiteboard in the classroom. Invest 35 cents in a dry erase marker. It's one of the best investments a college student can make. Because what you can do is write the material on the board. And there's two reasons that you would want to write that material on the board and sit in your seat and study it. The first is because you are up to 70% more likely to remember something once you've written it down, all right, over typing it or just reading it off of a slide. And the second reason is because let's just say you sit in that seat and you stare at the board and you study all the information, whether they're equations or definitions or the things that you need to study. What's going to happen the next day when you walk into that classroom is, even though the board has been erased, you are going to be able to take a look at that board and remember what you had written there the day before. And I mentioned writing things down and how much more likely you're going to remember something if you've written it down. Studying actually starts with taking good notes. Here's a quote from a professor in a research article who basically talks about when he speaks with his students about taking notes on laptops. The students are just typing away. And when the professor says, tell me what we just talked about, the students can't really recall what they were talking about. They just say things like, I'm just writing notes. I'm going to look at them later. I'm going to process them later. So essentially the idea is, while they're typing, they're not connecting, they're not processing, they're not coming up with good questions and good connective ideas about the material. They're just focused on making sure they get everything down. Whereas if you're writing it, you're thinking it, we have a hand-to-brain connection that's connecting some of the neurons in your brain to some of the material, and it's much more of a robust way of taking notes. So let's apply that to distance learning. whether we're commuters or whether we're taking online courses or in the middle of a national or global pandemic. Some of us are studying at home. So once again, let's take the top two answers. We surveyed a lot of our students and asked, where is it that you're studying? And a lot of them have chosen the kitchen or the bedroom. You know, the kitchen sort of being that center space where you're there to kind of clear your head, and interact with your family, and the bedroom because that's your space. Most students are studying and doing all their courses in their bedroom. And if we apply the visual retrieval piece to it, there's an issue there, and there becomes another problem. I like to call it the junk drawer effect. Essentially, what you're doing to your brain is you're throwing everything together in the same place. Literally, you're sitting in the same exact seat, surrounded by the same things, and your brain is just combining critical thinking and biology and computer science and all the different topics that you're studying, and you're not giving your brain different visual stimuli to associate with each of those like you would if you were sitting inside the classroom. Let's take a look at a schematic of a simple floor plan of a home and give you two different ideas on how you can use visual retrieval to study at home so your brain doesn't end up like a junk drawer. Let's say you've got 5 different classes. We'll say math is the first one. Only study math in one specific place, like the corner of your bedroom. Only study biology in a very different place, like the living room. Critical thinking could be in the kitchen, marketing outside on the porch or patio, and communications maybe in a different corner of your bedroom, facing a different direction. The reason that you would do something like this is because whenever you are in that corner, you are only studying communications. You're a communications student, and everything that you're associating with you around you is going to be linked to that material. You take the tests in those same locations as well, if possible, because that's where you studied them. Now, I understand that we don't necessarily all have this option. I myself am in a house with 3 kids and a wife, and I do most of my work from one spot in my bedroom. But what you can do is, if you are relegated to one spot, is pick different corners of the room for different subjects. Turn your chair around so your brain and your eyes are facing something different, and you're associating that situation, that seating arrangement, with that material. Some other tips that I've seen students use that sort of draw off your brain's proclivity to visual retrieval is using different color paper for each class. So if you have 5 different classes, only take your math notes on the blue paper, only take your communication notes on orange paper. And then when you go into the classroom or when you're sitting down in your home to take an exam, have that same color with you, have that same color note paper with you. Some students draw simple icons in the top corners of their notes. And then when their test begins, they draw that same icon because their brain is used to seeing that icon associated with that material, and sometimes it helps them to remember what they were studying. In conclusion, visual retrieval works because what it does is it takes the material and gives you an association with that material. Essentially what we're saying here is, if you can find a story, a meaning behind the material, you're more likely to remember it. That's why writing things down, drawing pictures, graphs, charts, things to help you understand what the material is all about, and having discussions with people about the material. This right here is one of the #1 student success metrics. Students who can meet with a professor or a tutor or another student and talk about the material, it's going to lead that student to a deeper understanding of the material because you're making associations and connecting stories to it so you truly understand it. Our brains understand stories. They don't understand lists. Here's the last thing we'll do, and I'll give you a great example. I'm going to give you a list right now. Clamshell, electrical outlet, Hawaii, wife, garbage truck, feathers, hat box, trip to Jamaica, sweaters, and 13 monkeys. I'm going to ask you right now, after giving you that list, do you even remember everything on that list? My guess is you probably remember a few things, but our brains don't process lists that way. Now let me tell you a story, and it's a true story. If you were to come into my office and see me in person, you'd see that I have a small but very visible T-shaped scar on my left cheek. The story behind that scar is it was the 4th of July. I was 4 years old, and I'm from the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, and so of course we were on a friend's farm. And we were running around and screaming and yelling all day long, and I was drinking a cup of lemonade. I finished the cup of lemonade and put that lemonade down in front of one of the farm dogs, and that dog took one sniff of the lemonade, looked up at me, and ripped my face off. 42 stitches. They had to stitch the muscle and then the skin. And that's how I got this scar on my face, ripped off by a dog on the 4th of July. And the reason I end with that story is because you probably can't remember a list that I gave you just a minute or two ago. But if you see me on campus this semester, and I ask you, how did I get this scar? My guess is you're going to be able to tell me that a dog bit my face. You might even remember that it was the 4th of July. My point here is you now have a story and an association to go along with some information. The more you can discuss these things with the people around you, the more likely you're going to be to not only understand them, but then to also retrieve them and speak intelligently about them when you're required to. If you have any questions about visual retrieval or any other study skills, please contact the Student Success Center. We have a wonderful staff of people who are here to help, and you can always email me as well. Thanks and have a great day.